Okay, well, if you'd have read the title of my video and doing a 3-point on this thing and you went down and read the description, you'd know that I did some digging and I think I actually found the problem on this thing. I guess we'll find out. And I've actually spent the last hour-ish doing more digging on Parts Book, and now I'm still left with some questions, but I think I got more answers than questions for once. So anyway, as you recall, this arm and shaft, something's not right about it. Firstly, let's go over here and look at the Parts Book. I've been doing all my looking on AGCO Parts Book online because that has superseded part numbers and all that fancy stuff, but this Parts Book gives you the illustration good enough to actually know what we're looking at here. So if you look in this Parts Book, that's the shaft and that's the arm. The arm is separate from the shaft and it is pinned. Okay, remember that. This shaft is welded. So, this is where shit gets deeper. I saw that last night and I was like, oh, that's the problem. Somebody must have sheared this off at some point, and rather than going and getting parts to fix it, they just welded it back together and got it very, very wrong. Well, unfortunately, it's not that cut and dry. But all the pictures I can find in the Parts Book of that shaft, for starters, whether it is the welded shaft, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. All the pictures I'm finding in the manual of that shaft, for starters, only show one hole cross drilled through it, which, if you recall, on the inside, this one had two, and neither one of them were quite right. That being said, here's where shit gets deeper. And it's why I like to use AGCO Parts Book, because AGCO Parts Book uses superseded part numbers, and all of the parts books that they transmit or transfer to digital format and put online were the last printed editions that have all of the superseded part numbers, everything in them, for the most part. So let's say they made on a 1600, let's say they made a change at serial number XXXXXXX somewhere in the production, and went from that 2-piece shaft to this welded 1-piece shaft. It would have, if you clicked on the part number for either this arm or the shaft, it will give you the part number for the individual part, and then it will say refer to part number such and such, or alternate part number such and such. And it will give you the alternate part number for the updated part. And most of the time, it will even give you a little breakaway box in the corner of the parts diagram that gives a picture of the updated part. In the 1600 book, all it ever shows is 2-piece. It shows a shaft and the arm and the pin, and it's all separate. This is where shit gets deeper. I went ahead and looked in the 1650, 1655, 270 part manual, which there's enough change between a 1600 and a 1650 and a 1655 that the 1600 gets its own manual. There's enough similarity between a 1650 and a 1655 and a 270. They're all thrown together in their own book. The early tractors, and it does not, I don't know, I didn't look to see if it was a 1650 or 1655 serial number because there was no break. But there is a serial number break in the 1650, 1655 parts book that shows going from a 2-piece shaft with an arm and the shaft to the 1-piece welded shaft. And it gives you the superseded part number. Okay. That part number also happens to be the same as the shaft in the 1800, because the 1800 is a welded shaft. So I went over real quick and I looked at the 1800, and on the 1800 with the lever in the full down position, this arm is parallel with the bottom of your quadrant plate here. So it's about right there with the shaft, or with the lever in the full forward position. Okay, so we got that. Also, in the parts book, when it shows the one-piece shaft, it only shows one hole cross-drilled in the end of the shaft. So, as you recall, this, or the arm is on this shaft crooked. And if you go over and look at the 1800, the way it's welded on the shaft is different than the way this one is welded on the shaft. The 1800 is a lot cleaner weld, it's a lot smaller weld. This one's a great big weld, and it's actually they actually went out far enough that they melted a corner of the block off. So that's got me really seriously thinking that at some point in its life, because this tractor before we got it, had a really, she was very well used by somebody that should not have been using tools. So what I'm thinking we got going on here is at some point they snapped that shaft off, and rather than go get the part to fix it, they decided to weld it and make their own shit. And when they welded it together, they got the angle of the dangle wrong. So what we got going on here, and when I call order parts, I'm going to do some more asking just to see, is these are the part numbers for the individual arm and the individual shaft. That's the part number for the one-piece assembly with the arm welded on the shaft. Now, what makes things a little deeper in the 1650 book is there's also a serial number break on that lever. There is no clear serial number break on the assembly that coincides with the lever. So I don't know if they went to the new shaft with a different lever, or if they just changed something about the way the lever was shaped. But regardless, what I'm gonna do is tomorrow I'm gonna call Maybaugh. I'm gonna get a key switch coming because I want to get that fixed, and I'm going to do some investigating with them as to what to do about the arm and the shaft. But I seriously think that shaft is screwed up, because if you recall too, there was grinder marks out on the end between the O-ring groove that's in it and the arm, and it ain't like grinder marks that would have happened at the factory. They were definite like hard wheel grinder marks, like somebody been hogging on it with a bench grinder. I don't think that's anything that would have happened at the factory. So I am like 95% positive that shaft is our culprit. So like I say, I'm going to get the key switch coming, figure out what the deal is. If it is just they decided to make this into a weldment instead of two pieces, so it's the same shit, they just superseded it with that part number, and get a gasket, and we'll tear it back apart next weekend and fix it right, hopefully. And even if I'd have seen this yesterday when I was working on it, I'd have probably still put it all together and got it out of the shop, just in case this turned into a week of hunting down parts. And that way Dad still got the shop and he could park his truck inside, and I'm not tying up the shop waiting on one part to put the damn tractor back together. And like I said in the video, that's a really simple fix, and I could probably have it done in an hour and a half, have it apart, put the new shaft in, and have it back together. Wham bam, thank you Sam. I still have enough time to get the tractor serviced out for the rest of the day. So that is where we're at. I'm going to get a new arm and a new shaft, or a new assembly, whichever way it happens, because there's something just not seen. The grinder marks and the fact that there's two holes drilled in the end instead of just one is just scaring me with that shaft. I don't think it's right. And the fact that the arm is welded on the shaft crooked. They did, if they'd have made that a weldment at the factory, they would have had a very, very, very good jig to weld all that together in, because clocking that shaft to the arm is very important. So yeah, I guess that's where we're at. So that's our quick update for the day. We'll get her figured out one way or the other. Sometimes, unfortunately, you gotta tear them apart to find the stuff that's screwed up, and sometimes you end up tearing it apart more than once you're chasing them down, because they're trying to tell you something. It's just a matter of how good you are at listening. But the fact that the 1800 with lever full forward only has that arm right about there is I don't know, but something's not right. So anyhow, that's where we're at, and we'll tear it back apart next weekend. So that's it for this one. We'll catch y'all on the next one.